Good morning, church. How's it going? You guys doing okay? Very cool. I bet you didn't think you'd see your youth pastor dance with a shark head on him this morning. Well, I hope you have your attention this morning, because this morning we're going to talk about what is love. What is love, baby? Love, love, love. Everybody loves love, right? Right? I mean, think about it. Love is all over the place in our society, in our world. I mean, countless books have been written about love. Way too many soap operas have been made, right? How many people in here watch The Bachelor or Bachelorette? Okay, Kyle, put your hand down. So, I mean, our world is just obsessed with love. I mean, there's dating apps all about love. There are dating websites, okay? I mean, people at BBC, where I went to college, they didn't go there. A lot of the girls there, they went to go get their MRS degree. Some of you got it, all right? So, I mean, and not only that, but there are just countless, endless songs about love, right? So many songs and so many things that have been written about love. But what is love? Really? What is love? Maybe if we were to think about it, maybe it's the relationship between you and your parents. Aww. And you're like, oh, they love me, I love them. I'm so unworthy of my parents' love. I should worship the ground they walked on. Right, parents? And I should listen to everything they say the very first time, because I love them and they love me. Oh, that's just so precious. Or maybe you're like, my love, it's between me, and it's between me and my boyfriend or girlfriend. We are so in love. We walk through the hallways, we are holding hands. No one can beat our love. And baby, we're going to go and we're going to have 10 kids, and it's going to be great. Guys, just warning you, if a girl approaches you like that, it's called "Are You In?" Okay? Or maybe, no, and all of you, older folks are like, no, love is between my hubby and I, or my wife and I. That's real love. That's love right there. Where we've spent countless days together. I see what she looks like with no makeup. I've seen him with his 10 o'clock shadow, and that's love. That's love. Or maybe love is between you and that donut you had this morning. Amen? So what is true, authentic love? You see, I'm the youth pastor here, and I've been working with Access Student Ministries for about 2 years now. And downstairs, we've been learning a lot about what is love. What is love? We've been looking at how we're called to love those no matter what, no matter the circumstance, no matter what happens to us, we're called to love those other people. We're called to love people who even hurt us. We're called to love people who are much different from us, who even reject us, despise us. How to love those who have made even horrible decisions. How to love those that we feel sometimes don't even deserve it. How to love even when everything within us is screaming not to love. See, many of us in here, when we think of love, we think about those things that do pop in our heads. The first things, the love between a mother and her new child. The love between a husband and his brand new bride. That love that is to be shared with certain people in our lives. But this morning, I really want to remind you guys that love applies to so many different areas in our lives. We've learned that we know that in Ephesians chapter 5, we learn that true love should imitate Christ's love. In 2 Corinthians 5, it says that we are to put other people first, and that our love should be consistent. In Romans 13, Paul explains that love never harms a person, but instead is meant to bring joy. In John 3:16, it shows that love love prioritizes giving over receiving. And in Galatians 5, we learn that true love originates in the fruit of the Spirit. Now, here's the deal. I could have turned those 5 points into a 2-hour-long sermon, and we would have been sitting here for a while with really hungry stomachs, and it would have been fine, and you guys would have sat there, and you would have taken some notes, nodded your heads, and been like, oh, that was very nice. And then we would have left, and we would have gone home, or gone to lunch, or whatever, and we say, well, that was nice. But I, as a pastor, have a much higher calling than just telling you 5 truths about love. You see, if that's all I did, I would have failed you as a church. Because my goal is not to tell you guys things to just make you feel good. To give you that butterfly feeling in your stomachs, to make you, feel better about yourselves. My goal is to not tell you things that make you more comfortable. My goal isn't even to tell you things that keep your feelings feel good. My goal is to not tell you biblical truths with no application. My goal is and always will be, you guys, and the same with Ken, our goal here at Temple is to lead you to Christ. You and I know God loves you and wants the best for you. But his goal is not that you would be comfortable and happy. I mean, just look at the 12 disciples. Was their lives very comfortable or happy? My goal, his goal, is that you would be holy. His goal is that you would die to self, pick up your cross, and follow him. So because that's God's goal in our lives, I am not going to just come up here and say, here you go, here's 5 truths about love, here's what love is, and I'll go home and just continue the rest of your week as if nothing had happened. No, my hope is that you would actually live this kind of love. That you would live this kind of love. Because any secular person can open up the Bible and read the truths of it, but there's a difference between somebody who's reading it and somebody who's living it. Because if we were to be really, truthfully, dead honest with ourselves, church, when life hits the fan, when people hurt us, when we meet people that don't believe the same things we do, when we come across people that go against our morals, we as believers, many times, you guys, we drop the ball. We drop the ball. Because I'm sure that there are many of us in this room who really, truly don't understand our responsibility and calling as Christians to truly love the way Christ loved us. Yes, I did just list these 5 principles of love and all of the places we can look in them, but how many of us in here, you guys, live that love? When we wake up in the morning, do we choose to put on Christ, or do we choose to respond to things in our own selfish ways or desires? And many times, myself included, we treat people as if they weren't worth dying for. And church, that's the exact opposite way we ought to treat everybody in this world. We should see everyone the same way Christ sees them, and that is worth dying for. Even those who we can't stand for any whatever reason. So, how do we change that? How do we change that? How do we show people the love and acceptance of Christ? Where do we begin? Well, this morning I have a very, very simple message. We begin ultimately with ourselves, but more importantly, we begin with how we love. Let's go ahead and turn to the book of Philippians. We're going to be in chapter 1 this morning, starting in verse 9. Paul is writing to the church of Philippi, and he says something very interesting to them in verse 9. He says, I pray that your love will overflow more and more, and that you will keep on growing in knowledge and understanding. Verse 10, for I want you to understand what really matters, so that you may live pure and blameless lives until the day of Christ's return. Verse 11, may you always be filled with the fruit of your salvation, the righteous character produced in your life by Jesus Christ. For this will bring much glory and praise to God. Now there are so many awesome things we can learn and pull out of this passage this morning, but there's one main key thing that Paul says that I really want to hit the nail on this morning. Is how do we love, church? How are we supposed to love? Abundantly. Abundantly. If you and I are ever going to fulfill our calling of showing the light of Christ, our love, just like what Paul said, our love should overflow. Just like Christ's blood overflowed on us. You see, there should be nothing holding us back from loving others the way Christ loves us. Our love should overflow. Our love should deluge out of these dams that we build up in our lives. Our love should rush out of us. His love should burst from our veins. And I wonder how many of us really, truly live with that kind of love. Paul, the writer of Philippians, even says earlier in that passage that letting our love overflow brings joy in our lives. Joy. When we choose to let Christ's love overflow in our lives, not only are we bringing Him glory, not only are we drawing closer to Him, not only will people's lives change, but it will bring us joy. Tell me God doesn't love us and know us enough and knows what will bring us fulfillment in life. He knows. You see, God knows ultimately what will bring us joy. And He knows it's nothing even remotely close that this sinful world gives to us. He also knows that none of our selfish responses will bring us joy either, even though we so commonly think they will. He knows treating your husband the same jerkish way he treated you won't bring fulfillment. He knows the way you scolded your child this morning for annoying you won't bring fulfillment. He knows being rude to the girl who made your drink wrong at Starbucks won't bring you fulfillment. He knows holding grudges towards people who have wronged us won't bring fulfillment. He knows snapping at your wife won't bring fulfillment. He knows gossiping about your cruel boss won't bring fulfillment. He knows that treating people with ill content because of something they've done won't bring fulfillment. You see, in those moments, in the moment, we sometimes think those things will bring such relief, such pleasure, such a satisfaction that we deserve to act that way. You're cutting down your own tree. Guys, it's by loving others and living for Him that brings fulfillment. So many think that that's a burden. So many people think that if I choose to live this way, if I choose to love other people in this conscious effort that this is hard, I don't want to. It goes against my nature. They did something wrong to me. They deserve it. I don't like it when these tough situations go on because sometimes we know which choice we're supposed to make, and yet a lot of times we choose our own selfish desires. And we see those moments as a burden, but really, and I'm going to say this, and a lot of you guys will be like, what? But really, when struggle comes, I pray and I hope that you see it as glorious grace. Because God doesn't have to give us opportunities to choose to be more like Him. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to give us opportunities for us to choose grace, but He does. That's a gift. It's a gift. Why do you think when somebody approached Jesus, came up to Him one day and said, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment?" Oh, church, we can quote it all day long. But do we live it? Do we live what it says in Matthew? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Do we live it? I have a really good friend. She is one of my dearest, closest friends. She's just so much fun to hang around with, and just recently we heard part of her testimony down in Access, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And you see, she was, I don't remember all the details of how old she was or whatever, but she was a lot younger. And she had had a lot of boyfriends. She had gotten into a lot of drinking and just a lot of poor decisions. She'll be the first to admit that. And she found out one day that she was pregnant. She found out one day that her and her boyfriend, after having sex, said she had gotten pregnant. And she was terrified, if I remember correctly. She was, what do I do? Who do I go to? What kind of, what does anyone do when you find out you're pregnant and you think about what people will think about you? You're not married. You wonder what your parents will think, how your friends will treat you. You grow worried and anxious, nervous. 1,000 things could have been just flooding through her head. And she chose to pursue the option of an abortion. So she's driving in her car to Planned Parenthood. And as she's pulling up to up into the driveway, just try and picture this in your head for a second. Tons and tons and tons of Christians, picketers, people with pamphlets, literally hitting her car, slamming pamphlets on her window, screaming at her, yelling at her as she's pulling into this parking lot. Oh man, this really makes me not want an abortion. I love it when people scream at me and tell me what not to do. She was terrified. She was more scared of them than the procedure that was about to happen. She went inside, she had the procedure done, and she sat in the waiting room afterwards. And she was looking around and she saw all these young women who had just had abortions. And all of them were crying, including herself. And it wasn't because of the pain, it was because of their choice. So life continued. She had her abortion. She heard about a conference. She heard about how they were going to go to, it was a women's conference for for girls who had either had abortions or were struggling with just a slew of things. And she heard that there was going to be kind of like a little session, a little like discussion for women who had had abortions. And she really didn't want to go to this thing. And she always put it so perfectly. She always said that there was always two voices in my life. And finally I started to listen to the still and small one. So she went into this classroom, and she's the only girl there. Only one. And there's some conference speaker up at the front writing her name on the board or something, and she turns around and she sees her walk in. She goes right up to her and she says, "Honey, when did you have your abortion?" The point I'm trying to make, you guys, is there's a difference. A lot of times people view holding a pamphlet in front of someone's face and yelling at them and screaming at them and hitting their car will just automatically just change their heart and think that this is me loving them. This is me showing them that they shouldn't do this. This is wrong. This is bad. This is horrible. I wonder what would have happened if she met that second lady first and a relationship was built. And God's love overflowed through this woman into my friend's life. You see, after she met, that's honestly when her life began to change. It wasn't changed when people started screaming at her and yelling at her and think that this is how you ought to live. It's when somebody put an arm around her and said, "God loves you. Listen, I know you've made this mistake. I know you've made this choice. But He's died for that. Let's work on this." That's love. And can I just add a little side note? That's how you change a broken generation. Pray for them. Love them. Bond with them. Hang out with them. Guide them in the ways of the Lord. Guys, lives are not changed by people telling you how wrong you are. Lives are changed by His love overflowing into their lives. That's how my life changed. When I grew up in an abusive, horrible, nasty household, that's what changed my bitter, broken hatred in my life. Hateful heart in my life. So, does His love overflow in your life? I can answer that for myself, but what about you? Honestly. What about you? When I told you this story, were you uncomfortable? Were you moved? Were you gripped? Were you angry? Were you sad? So as you sit in your pew worrying if I'll ever end this message, ask yourself, Lord, does your love overflow in my life? Lord, have I been selfish with the way I treat my spouse? Lord, when my kids see me and talk about me, do they see your love and talk about your grace? Lord, is there anyone in my life I need to apologize to? Whether it's a friend, a parent, a relative, a coworker. Lord, what are the things in my life you want me to change? Lord, what are the areas in my life that need so desperately to be chiseled away? So if you don't know, my wife and I were foster parents, and I absolutely love it. It's an adventure every single day. Right now we have a little six-week-old. His name's Oliver. Just a really, really cool, crying little baby. Crazy. Anyway, about right before, or excuse me, right after we got Oliver from the hospital, we also many of you know him. His name was Eli. And Eli was one of the just coolest little kids I've ever met. And he was born and suffered with just a lot of stuff. And we had him for 3 months. And the social workers, the people we were meeting with, the state, just all these people, they would always ask us, are you prepared to adopt this child? And my wife and I are always like, yes, oh my gosh. We love him. He's like our own. We love him. Yes, of course. And a lot of times people would come up to us and they'd say, it looks like in the long run, it looks like you're probably going to adopt him. Just the way things are going, the way his parents are just kind of out of the picture. It looks like you guys would probably adopt him. So be prepared for that. And so we're excited. We are jazzed. We are on the edge of our seat. We are so in love with little Eli. We're so in love with him and all of his little quirks and all the ways he just acts and just who he is and his character. And one day the social worker came into our house and it was just a routine monthly visit. And she said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we found a relative. He's going to go to that relative." I've faced a lot of hard stuff in my life. If you've heard my testimony, and I've shared it quite a bit, I've faced a lot of really unfortunate circumstances. But not once, I think, in my life have I ever legitimately felt the whole world stop. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't muster up how to respond when she said this. Honestly, I was pretty devastated. But what do? My wife and I, we kind of put on the masks, the happy face, and we were like, okay, cool. That's great. Like, he's going to be with family. That's great. That's really good. And I had a lot of people, during the time when we were having him, they're like, man, good for you. That is awesome. Or they'd come up to me and say, man, I could never do that. I could never let him go. Or people come up to me and say, well, you can't really love them fully like your own. They're not really yours. If you give them, then you have to give them back, then you're broken. Guys, I am not called to love halfway. Nowhere in the Bible does it call me to love people up to a point where it's comfortable. The Bible doesn't state, okay, yeah, love people until love this child enough, but just be a little reserved. Just reserve a little bit because you don't want your heart to be ripped out. Guys, I'm not called to love like that. I am called to love in a manner in which the love of Christ is overflowing out of me every single day. No matter what happens, no matter how badly it hurts, no matter what kind of circumstances or consequences happen because of the way I love. We are called to love sacrificially, abundantly, and like Paul says, overflowing. This is really important to me, the way that we love, because this is love. Love is the root of the gospel. The gospel is what changes lives. But at the end of the day, I hope you at least know why we should love. In Philippians 2, chapter 2, verse 6, it says, "Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took up the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross." That's a lot of love. I'm going to invite the band to go ahead and just come on up. In order to grow in love, you guys, we must know the God of love and understand his love. As we experience knowing God through Christ in an intimate way, we learn Christ's love. He sacrificially gave his own life to benefit others. He considered the needs of others as greater than his own, giving up the glories of heaven to live as a servant, a slave on earth, ultimately being obedient to the point of death. Guys, the more we focus on Jesus Christ and walking with him every day, the better we understand him and his love. As we become more in love with Christ and know him better, we learn what it means to love, truly love sacrificially, in the way in which we are called to love. We begin to have the same mind as Christ. The more we think like Christ, the greater our capacity to let our love overflow more and more. So, church, my challenge to you this morning is, how do you love? How do you love? What is love to you? Is love just a feeling that you share between those who are close to you? Or is love a calling in your life? Are you willing to love others even if they've hurt you? Are you called to be obedient to that calling? Because you want to know how Jesus responded to people despising him? You want to know how Jesus responded when people spat in his face? You want to know what people did, or what Jesus did when people rejected him and hated him? He died for them. And I wonder if we would do the same. That when everyday pressure-filled circumstances happen in our lives, when the kids are annoying, when you can't handle your spouse, when those relatives you can't handle come to visit, when you just can't put up with your coworker, fill in the blank. Do you choose love? Do you choose love? When you come across people who are completely morally just on the other side of you, do you choose love? When people who have made such heinous, bad decisions in their lives, do you love them? I pray that you would take this moment to reflect and to pray and to really ask God, Lord, do I love people the way you want me to love?